Hello. Right, it's telling me the webinar is being recorded and we are all here. Just waiting to see if anyone ticks in. If you do find yourself in the webinar, please feel free to say hi in the chat. Anybody at all. Okay, just pop your name in. Maybe let me know if you're a teacher or a learner, or maybe you're a parent of somebody who homeschools. Anything like that would be fabulous. So just say hi, put anything you'd like in the chat. Whilst we're waiting, I'll just talk a little bit about homeschooling in the UK and what that means in case you are listening from an international angle. So homeschooling in the UK is a full-time educational option where you've opted out of the education system and your child is learning at home instead and isn't going to a formal source of education at school, and you are choosing to educate at home. And that is something you are allowed to do in UK legislation. You just need to register with your local authority and let them know that is what you've decided. So, anyone who wishes to say hi or to put a question in, I'd like to make this session quite interactive. Might be quite dull if it's just me talking. We'll give it another moment or two and see if anyone else signs in. But yeah, if you are here, give me a hi, say hello, pop something in the chat, and let's see what we've got. We can be quite interactive about this. You can ask any questions as we go. Hello, Anita, South Coast. Very interesting talk. You're a fluent German speaker. I don't know if you heard what I was saying, Anita, about homeschooling being an option recognised in law in the UK. You can withdraw your child from full-time school at any time and sign in with your local council to say that you are homeschooling, and then it's entirely up to you to educate your child. Just give it another minute and see if anyone else is going to pop in and say hi, and then we'll get started. Anita, yeah, I can see you're a fluent German speaker. I teach French and German. Very lovely. Have you done any homeschooling? Interested to know if you've got any homeschool experience, anyone? Maybe you've taught in homeschoolers, or maybe you are a homeschooler or a parent of a homeschooler, or maybe you're a teacher. English living in France. Hello, Annie. Lovely to see you. You're a homeschool parent, Chris. Great. Are you doing any languages at the moment? Be fabulous to know. Another minute or so, just to see if anyone else pops in, and then we will get started. Give me one more minute. Okay, so I'm going to pop the share screen on, and off we will go. Have a look. So, Workwear Secondary School, Nita, as an LSA, huge issue that students are trying to be taught at home. I tutor English, love to teach languages, especially young students who are opting to be homeschooled. Okay, fabulous. Well, I'd like to make this session quite interactive. So if you have any questions as we go, please pop them in the chat. I will be sharing my screen now so you get to see the first slide. So you're in homeschoolers and language learning for Key Stage 3 and 4. I'm aware, Anita, of the increase in people who are opting for homeschool, often for mental health reasons. We've got some quite able students who are opting for homeschool for those reasons. And yes, you're right, it's good to be able to offer a variety of subjects to those students. I myself am an independent language teacher, so I'm the person who gets called in when someone decides to homeschool and they want to do GCSE. I teach French and German, so if they want to do GCSE in one of those, we work on that together without any support from school. Okay, so let's make a start. Why is it decided not to? There we go. So first of all, why bother learning a foreign language? And I've gone with why bother because quite often in language learning, I get to hear, oh well, everybody speaks English much better than I speak French or German or Spanish. Why bother? Okay. Well, here we go. Here's a bunch of reasons to bother. So the UK overall has a shortage of language skills, so it makes you more employable, and you can work abroad. It's much easier to work in a foreign country and get those cultural experiences if you at least speak some of the language and you can improve it as you go. You've also got all the cultural exchange angles. You know, speaking the language enables you to learn about other people and places. And when you meet people who speak those languages, you can interact at a different level if you're speaking a bit of their language and a bit of your own. If you see me glancing to the side whilst I'm doing this, I've just got my notes next to the laptop, so that's all that I'm looking at. Okay. And then there's the whole travel thing. So I don't know if anyone's been watching the BBC's Race Across the World, but that is certainly a show that shows you the benefits of being able to speak a bit of the language. All those contestants who were in South America, the ones that spoke Spanish, they were able to do better in that race than the people who just spoke English, because even with their little bits of Spanish, they were able to help themselves and communicate. So if you're going to travel, speaking another language, particularly where you are, is really useful. And then there's all those benefits for the brain. We've done a lot of research in recent years, and we know that multilingual brains have different muscles. Brains don't have muscles, really, do they? They have different neuroplasticity that helps develop the brain. That means the pathways in the brain function differently. The way the brain is able to operate is different simply through the benefit of speaking another language. So it has that biological, physical advantage to it as well. And then, well, there's more opportunity in the world for people who speak more than one language, just in general. Gary Lineker once said he spent hours learning Japanese and French as an adult when he could have done either at school. Gary Lineker obviously wasn't really keen on languages at school and had to make that up in later life. So teaching young people whilst you've got them in homeschool is setting them up for all the things that might happen to them as they progress through adult life. And they get to join a minority. They get to be one of only 1 in 3 Brits who speak another language well enough to hold a whole conversation. And those are advantages that, you know, you would hope that your homeschooler could take forward into all sorts of jobs and situations. You might think you're not going to work abroad, but if you know, my hairdresser works on cruise ships, and being able to speak a bit of Spanish is really beneficial for him when he's away on the cruise ship. Lots of jobs have an underlying element that is supported by language learning. But even if it's not about employment, it's about those benefits for the physical biology and the extension of opportunities in life and deeper understanding of other people. Okay, and if you want to read for yourself, you can certainly see that you've got a survey there that's been done in the UK in 2013. Just going to check into the chat because I can see one thing has come up. Let's have a quick look. Yes, I did. Completely highlighted how important language can be. Yes, you're right. The language can be very important. Okay, so we are going to move on. In one moment. Which language to learn? Well, I would obviously suggest French and German. French and German are definitely the best languages because I teach them. All joking aside, let me just turn the page on my notes, you will also find that in other languages, excuse me, we have a shortage. So the British Council did a study. Now, admittedly, their study was before Brexit. They haven't updated it, probably because due to a combination of pandemic, Brexit, change in government funding, that hasn't been a priority. But when they did their pre-Brexit study, they suggested that the most useful languages in the UK for the future would be Spanish, Mandarin, French, Arabic, and German. So those would be the top 5, followed by Italian, Dutch, Portuguese, Japanese, and Russian following on. And they also found that we have low speaker numbers in all of the common languages. So that's French, German, Spanish, and Mandarin. And so there's a demand for those speakers. And if you wanted to learn a language based purely on what would be most useful, picking one of those would definitely be the way forward. However, there are many, many, many other languages and many other reasons why you might pick a particular language. You might well find that it's a family influence. Maybe you have a connection with a country or a person who speaks the language. You might just really enjoy another language and choose to learn it for that reason. I would suggest at homeschool, depending on your outcomes, what it is you're looking to do in the long term, you have all this flexibility. You really could be choosing something that appeals to you and be fairly certain that it's going to be useful in the future. So there's nothing wrong with learning something more obscure. It will definitely be useful. You might not be able to see exactly how at this moment, but chances are you will use that. However, if you were looking to make a decision based on what society thinks will be useful in the coming years, these are the languages that have been recommended. So why these languages? Well, let's look at those top ones. So German, often recommended because of its business associations and connections. Spanish, because it has a really big number of speakers globally, if you count South America as well, and also for travel. A lot of people like to visit Spanish-speaking countries. Mandarin is often recommended for trade. And the French are quite simply our nearest neighbours. Quite useful to be able to speak French. And Italian tends to be more because people want to be involved in fashion or furniture and design, and a lot of those things in Europe come through or from Italy. So if you're already decided you want to learn a language, one of these is definitely the way forward. I think homeschool will help you. How do I get in touch? We'll maybe come to that one at the end. I'll save that one, Anita. Thank you. But I will definitely come to that. Okay, let's see where we're going next. So, there we go. Qualifications. Now, I don't want to be controversial, but homeschool is an opportunity to do something different. And you can decide if you want a qualification. Is a qualification relevant for the student that you want to get onto a homeschool course? You might find that you need to think about what are qualifications for, and is that relevant to the young person you're teaching? So they are useful for entry to employment, for sure. They are useful for re-entry to the education system. If you have someone who's homeschooling at Key Stage 4 and will want to access standard school education in Key Stage 5, they might need those to enter the education system. Sometimes a qualification can be a goal or achievement of itself, but don't assume that because you're learning a language, there has to be a qualification on the end. It's definitely worth thinking about whether or not you want or need a qualification. There are cases where a qualification could be destructive if a young person has a fear or phobia of exams. There could be mental health reasons to avoid a qualification. That doesn't mean that you don't need a structure, and it might be relevant to your young person to use the structure of a qualification to bring them to that level without actually going through the exam process and thereby alleviate the pressure. But because homeschoolers are all unique individuals with their own particular needs, you will need to decide whether a qualification is relevant to the young person in front of you. And then there's more than just GCSE and A-level, you know. It is definitely not the only option. So before we go down the off-call register route, we also need to think about, I only teach French and German. There will be similar schemes for other languages, but there are the DELF and DALF courses in French, run by the Académie Française, and you've got the DAF, Deutsch als Fremdsprache, course in German. Both of those use the European languages framework, so you can provide a structure, you can provide a level, and at the end, sit an exam if that's relevant for you, that will give you a certificate that says that what level you are at, that can be taken forward to educators and employers. So those are definitely worth considering. Within the UK framework, there are lots of things going on. So you have short courses, you have NVQ units, GCSE, A-level do not need to be the only option. I would encourage you to have a look at the Ofqual Register of Regulated Qualifications. The languages, if you go in there, you can find the bit of languages, and that QR code will take you there. And when I say plan your outcomes, where is this young person going to be in 2 years' time? What do they think? Where is this young person wanting to be in 5 years' time? What qualification would help them on that journey? If you are going to teach a qualification, make sure you've considered all your options and you're finding qualifications that are strictly relevant to the young person in front of you. Make sure before you go too far down this route that you check suitability for age group with the Joint Council for Qualifications, because they will show which age group a particular qualification is aimed at, and that will be quite relevant to the course content. So qualifications aimed at the final examination at 16 will have a different course content to those aimed at adults, to those aimed for final examination at 18. So you want to bear in mind when you're choosing a qualification, what is relevant, the age group that you're working with, and the Joint Council for Qualifications, the JCQ, will have a list of. You can also go on their website and find a list of independent examination centres. Now, if like Anita, you are teaching young people who have opted out of school, you probably don't need an independent examination centre because they will come into school to do their examinations and the school will be the examination centre. However, if you are a homeschooling parent or private tutor, you will need to register with an independent examination centre if your young person is sitting final examination. And when you're doing this process of deciding which qualifications are relevant, it is worth looking at the JCQ website and finding out which examination centres independently examine the qualifications you're wanting, just to make sure that there's one near you, and it's easy enough to, do the logistics, get the young person there and complete the course. I'm just going to check in on the chat. Anything else relevant? No one else asking anything at the moment. So we'll use that and we'll head on down to our next page, which is about how to learn a language. Well, this kind of aimed really at homeschoolers learning how do you learn it? What are the nuts and bolts, right? You're a homeschooler. What are your options? It's worth remembering that languages are mostly about interaction, whether that's in writing or in speaking. Ultimately, human language is for communication, and we don't really do that in isolation. We do that, with other people. So you should be looking to bear that in mind, but also choose the way that suits your young person best. And you've got a lot of options. Self-study, it has advantages and disadvantages. You can definitely go at your own pace. And you can go back over things you don't understand or work through things learning slowly or quickly if that's relevant to you. But you also have the self-motivation side. You need to be very self-motivated to complete successful self-study. And there is the problem of having a lack of interaction. We've just said language learning is about communicating with other people, connecting with other humans. That's what language is for. So self-study can be quite isolating, and there needs to be an element of interaction with another person in some way, really. Self-study can be a good place to start, but ultimately it needs to be a bit more. So then you have the option of face-to-face lessons in whatever format, which is great. The problem we sometimes have with face-to-face lessons is geographical availability. If you live in a big city like London, chances are you'll find someone teaching your language near you. If you live more rurally, there's a chance that you maybe won't find anyone. And there's also the consideration of what the language is. There's a lot of French teachers in the UK. There are fewer German teachers. So, and the same goes for other languages. It might be a case of who can you find that's able to teach face to face. And it's worth thinking about group or individual. Individual is great, particularly if you're homeschooling and you want that social and interaction aspect. But then some young people might find that that interaction itself, that social interaction aspect, is actually one of the things that is really challenging and that has driven them to homeschool in the first place. And maybe they are separating their social interaction from their learning. So what I mean by that is maybe learning for them happens best one-on-one, where they're not also feeling anxious about the interaction with other people, and they're using different contexts, maybe sports clubs or youth clubs or youth groups to do their socializing, where they can focus on just working on their interaction skills rather than having to do both. So that can be a downside of group lessons. However, group lessons have the massive benefit that they can socialize, they have each other to speak the language with, they have each other to learn from, and sometimes learning from other learners can be as beneficial, if not more beneficial, than learning from the teacher. So that's another aspect to consider. Group lessons tend to be more tailored. Anyone who's ever taught more than one person, which if you're a teacher in this session, I hope is all of you, will know that as soon as there's two, automatically there's a different balance to the lesson. So if your learner has very specific needs in terms of pacing or in terms of maybe vocabulary and the type of thing they need to learn, group lessons might not be suitable there. But on the other hand, to have a group of people to progress with and move forward with can be very motivating to some learners. So it's really about choosing group or individual, what works for your learner. And then there's online. Of course, you've got a massive choice. That can be challenging in itself. There's a big choice of languages and also a big choice of teachers. How do you know where to start? That can be challenging. You've also got the technical challenges of being online. You know, so not all young people are comfortable with the technology. That can be a learning process in itself. And socializing is obviously very different online, I think, as we've all experienced in the last few years, to what it is in more of a face-to-face context. So online is great if you can't find anyone local. It's also great if you've got a young person who's maybe a bit nervous about getting out and about. That can be a thing too. And you can achieve some really good, I teach online predominantly, you can achieve some really great outcomes online as well. Not to say it doesn't work, but you need to throw it into the mix and have a think about, does this work for my learner? Okay, let's see, no more comments in the chat, so we will just move on to the next slide. Learning beyond language lessons. Okay, so what I mean by this, let's just turn the page in the notes, but what I mean by this is that there are more ways to learn than simply having language lessons. you can, of course, learn languages outside of the classroom. And there's lots of ways to do that. When we say travel, people tend to think, oh, I should go off traveling around the world. It's not really got to be that. Even a day trip to Calais can be useful. Depends what you do on that day trip. If you engage with local supermarkets, if you go and watch a French language film in the cinema, if you order in a restaurant, all of those things can be beneficial. Any travel, really. For more targeted practice, we often recommend language courses abroad. That offers the student the chance to immerse themselves in the local culture at the same time as improving their language skills. That's often a good way to go. Holidays. Holidays are interesting, aren't they? Because you think, ooh, I'm on holiday. I'm probably not really learning anything here. But even if you have the sort of teen who just wants to watch TV and hide in their room, the very fact of having Spanish adverts or French adverts or German adverts or wherever you are in between their television programs changes their perspective and is helping engage them with that language. Structured exchanges are obviously different. It's not really a holiday, and there's not so many of those about these days. It's more these hosted visits. I know the Goethe Institute, for example, does a young person's cultural exchange where they stay in hotels and the young people work together on a joint project whilst they're in England and in Germany. So those kind of structured exchanges can be very beneficial too. And don't overlook family and friends. You know, longer stays are sometimes possible that way. And you know, even if the friends don't speak English whilst your young person is staying there, when they're out and about, they're still getting that beneficial exposure. So all travel is good. No matter what, that's a great way of learning beyond the language learning classroom. Exchange partners. I've got a big note on my stuff that says careful when looking for under 18s. You do want to be aware of what your young person is doing and who you are connecting them with. And if you have concerns about how to do that safely and what might or might not work for you, then I'm happy to talk to you on a case-by-case basis after that. But for example, if your child has taken part in one of these cultural exchanges, there might be an existing contact there that they could be safely having online conversations or email or WhatsApp or whatever messaging system they're going to use, chats with. That's definitely an option. And it might even be that there's someone you know who speaks the language. You might be prepared to spend some time, you know, exchanging with your young person. Or alternatively, sometimes if you look in your local area, there will be someone who would like to do some conversation in their language in exchange for your language. So those are options too. But please just be very careful with safeguarding when you're connecting young people for conversation or written exchanges. Reading. So reading doesn't have to be sitting down and reading a novel. It can be a picture book. And even better if the picture book is bilingual and you have the English on one page and the French or German on the other. That is absolutely fabulous. Comics and graphic novels are pretty good as well. Anything where you're at an early stage, not purely relying on the text for information, but you have other clues as well. Foreign language websites, similarly. And then when we move on to thinking about TV and video, you've obviously got subtitle options. Most streaming services have foreign language material in some form now. You can put your subtitles on those and be watching those. Those are all definitely things that would help. And then at home with the family, you're probably scratching your head thinking, but we don't speak this foreign language. Well, no, but you could incorporate specific words or phrases into your day-to-day. Maybe say goodbye in Italian every time your young person leaves, or say pass the pepper in Spanish every time you're having dinner. find phrases that allow you in your day-to-day to play with language and make it something that lives beyond language. Okay, I'm just popping into the chat in case there's anything I need to talk about. Have you got any specific reading materials you could recommend for advanced students? Oh, yes. Probably, could you let me know which language you're thinking of and whether you're thinking bilingual text or whether you're thinking monolingual text? But okay, I'll come to the chat a bit more at the end. Right, let's head on. So, change all the pages. Here we go. Homeschooling a language for multilingual families. Okay. So this is where somebody in the home already speaks the language. And it's worth considering that a lot of children live in multilingual households. In fact, almost 20%, it says at the bottom, of school-age children in the UK are bilingual. So it's worth considering that. It can be harder if you're homeschooling a language that somebody in your household speaks to achieve a balance across the four skills. There's a natural tendency towards listening and speaking, and then less so towards reading and writing. And if you think about how children learn their first language, often listening and speaking they can already do when they get to school, and then once they're in school, we teach them reading and writing. And if that formal education in reading and writing is neglected, it can often be the case that those become quite weak skills for them, and those are quite hard things to school without any kind of formal structure. It can be done, but as a parent, as the native speaker, you need to make the deliberate effort to teach your young person those reading and writing skills. And that in itself can put a strain on familial relationships. And obviously, for some people, that will be really easy, and for others, not so much. So the parent-child relationship tends to be different to a parent-teacher relationship. It can be quite challenging, particularly with teens, to switch from being the parent to being the teacher. It can be useful at that point to engage another adult to teach those more formal skills and relieve the pressure on the relationship. And back to this old chestnut, do you want or need qualifications in your language that you're speaking at home? Those are, back to that qualifications conversation, that thinking that we had at the start. And then, well, there's this option that if your family still lives in the country where that language is chosen, you could send them to school there for a bit. I realise this isn't homeschool then, technically, but you could withdraw them from the UK education system in order to give them a period of time learning in the country where the language is spoken, particularly if that's an option for you to be with them, or if you have family you can send them to live with, certainly. And then we have support home language learning, and that's kind of, I think, a little bit where Anita's coming from, that she'd like young people to be learning additional to the English that she's giving them already. And if you're teaching another language at home that isn't being taught in school, it's not true that the formal teaching at school will not support the language that you're teaching at home. So, for example, if you're in school in an English-speaking school and you speak a foreign language at home, those same pencil holding, reading, writing, patience, spending time, comprehension skills will be transferable to the language that you're learning at home. And if you need that formal education, there are always weekend or evening language schools. And yes, so those things can work together. You just have to sort of think about it quite hard. Right, before we move on, let's have a check-in with the chat. French B1 or B2? Marvellous. Bilingual or monolingual? So are you looking for French English, or are you looking for French on its own? That's really useful to know as well. Okay, and I'm just So let's change to the next slide. Reintegration into mainstream at 16 plus. Now, I totally realise that this is not by any stretch going to be something that all students are going to want to do. However, in my experience, a good number of those who have homeschooled to GCSE will then want to go on into college or sixth form. So it's worth thinking about, how do you reintegrate their language learning journey at post 16? So I think it's a good idea to start with, why are you here? What started you on your home school journey? You know, for a lot of people, it's an active choice, homeschooling. For many others, it's a solution to a problem. Has that problem changed? Have those choices changed? What post 16 pathway is relevant to your language learner? And really choose something at post 16 that takes into account those needs. And really then also consider all of your options. Yes, there is college and sixth form, there are apprenticeships, there are sports schools. Really think about the whole picture for your young person and what context they need to take that language learning forward into at post 16. I would suggest, you know, they've had this amazing opportunity in homeschool to explore themselves, to explore their strengths, to explore their weaknesses as language learners. And if languages is something they want to take forward, then it needs to be something that they can explore in depth. So that will influence your choice. And if they're not sure, then maybe opt for something that is broader and more general. So, for example, exploration in depth is very clearly possible in qualifications like the A level at post 16, and also in the International Baccalaureate. However, if you want them to be taken, they're not so sure, they're not so language focused, then they might want to think about apprenticeships where they have a module that could be in the language, or a sports school where the focus is more on sport and the academic comes alongside. Really think about what suits your young person. For languages, if you're going to take that forward into post 16, you are going to need a GCSE or similar for access to the course. And when I say similar, we've obviously got equivalent qualifications in Scotland, and I'm also thinking about those certificates for the European stages of language learning. Right, pop back up to the chat. What have you got for me? English to French. I'm looking for materials with audio, visual, and also reading magazines, readers, or books. Okay, students about 13 to 14. I will come back to you at the end. Thank you for that. Oh, I can't see your name in the chat. Okay. Guest. Oh well, never mind. But thank you for that. I will come back to you. Okay. And then common language learning problems. So this is a list of things that homeschoolers have come across and that parents have said to me, you know, we're having trouble with this, and some ideas of how you might solve them. Please feel free to jump in on the chat if you have any you would like to add or any you're specifically interested in. I'd definitely like to talk about those as well. If not, I will just continue to gently potter through the list, and we will go through all the things that are going on here. So, common language learning problems. The student struggles to remember vocabulary. I mean, it's pretty common in school as well, but at home, even more frustrating because you've not got the support of a classroom or a teacher. So this is really about how do we learn vocabulary? And the cognitive science tells us that little and often is best. So I say weekly vocabulary learning target, and practice 3 times a week, 10 to 20 minutes, no longer. And then what do they do in that practice time? What are the nuts and bolts? So you can do matching games on paper, you know, having the French on one piece of paper and the English on the other, or whatever language you're learning. You can obviously do that online on apps such as Quizlet as well. Flashcards work for some, going through those with vocabulary on each side. making up a silly song and singing it along, or if a silly song is not something that you're going to make up readily, there are an awful lot of songs available on YouTube for various language learning purposes. My personal favourite in German is the Munich Super Crew. They're really good fun and they have a lot of good songs. That can be a way to go. Easy things. If your learner is quite visual, you can label different things around your house in different languages. You can put a list of vocabulary they're struggling with next to something they see every day. So maybe next to their laptop or next to where they brush their teeth, on the bathroom mirror, those sort of places. But key here, no matter what it is repetition. They need to see that list every day. They need to sing that song every day, listen to it on headphones, whatever it is, it's repetition, 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 and finding ways to make it fun. Okay. No one on the chat, so I'm just going to keep going and talk about how some students get really embarrassed when speaking. The first one here is to think about what are they like as a person. People who are quite shy in general, and particularly already in their first language, are unlikely to suddenly be really talkative in a foreign language. In fact, the opposite, they're likely to find that even harder. What can you do about it? So I ask people to talk to themselves in the foreign language. And if that's too ridiculous for them, talk to themselves in the mirror, talk to a pet, talk to a parent or sibling, even if they don't understand you. All of it helps build confidence for getting students speaking when they get into the lesson. Listening is often a difficult one because students feel it goes by so fast, even the slowed down materials, that they just can't follow them. So I'd suggest, first of all, getting the subtitles on in the foreign language. That often helps. And if that's still not helping, try it in English. And if that's still not helping, good learning materials should have a full transcript. Can they read the transcript and understand that first? And then work through the listening using the transcript to support them. So really it's about finding ways to scaffold your learner in their listening. Okay, just aware we're coming up to 12 o'clock, which is technically the point at which I need to finish. So let's see how many more of these we might get through. My learner doesn't understand the grammar, and that can be a problematic. Really, in my opinion, and I'm willing to hear other people's opinions. You know, if you want to tell me I'm wrong, I'd be interested to know. But grammar that you don't understand needs to be explained by someone who does understand it, and also someone who will work with you metacognitively to understand what you're thinking and how you're approaching the grammar, and then can explain to you where the gaps in your thinking are and can help you get to a point where you can apply that thinking in a different way to the grammar. So my real answer with student doesn't understand the grammar is to be thinking about how that grammar is being taught. And then we're about to cover this for the new GCSE that we're starting in September. Some students can't sound out the language when reading. Well, this shouldn't really be a surprise unless you've taught them the phonics. They're not going to be able to do that. And that is exactly like when we teach children phonics in school, when we teach them their first language and they learn to read, they need to understand how those phoneme grapheme links work. So the answer here is to work through a phonics course and sort of start really building on those sounds. And the final one, coming up to 12 o'clock, won't write in the foreign language. And won't write is a different problem to can't. So we're talking about learners here who have writing skills and are able to use them. I'd ask myself, are they writing willingly in their first language? Because that's often a starting point. If so, then you can start thinking about audio transcription. So instead of reducing that cognitive load, so that instead of having to make something up and write it, they can listen to something in the foreign language and write down what they've heard. I would think about word cards where they can, excuse me, make up their own sentences and then copy those out. Really, a lot of similar writing strategies to ones that you would use with reluctant writers in a first language or in English in our context. Oh, made it. It is 12 o'clock. So I'm going to pop my final screen up, hopefully. Do that. There we go. So if you are after more information, you can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook. I am in the process of setting up a Facebook group for languages homeschooling. If you are interested, you can email me and I will pop you on the list for that and we'll get you connected. Down the bottom, you have those QR codes to connect me on the social. So let's head back to those questions we had in the chat. Pop those up. Oh, no, didn't want them to be that big. Make them smaller again. Put those out of the way somewhere. Where? Okay, so we've got student, really interesting. I'm glad you enjoyed it, guest. We've got here, any specific reading materials? And Anita, let's start with you. How do you get in touch with students that are being homeschooled and help them with language learning? Wow, that's a really big question, isn't it? And so there are a number of different ways that happens. It depends a little bit on their parents and how they are interacting. Occasionally schools will ask. I've had the odd Senko say, hey, we've got a student who's really able, who's learning from home. We'd like them to do GCSE. Can you teach them? Often parents will contact me. So they'll see my advertising somewhere out there on the internet. And they will get in touch and say, oh, we see that you're homeschooling. Facebook plays quite a big role in that. But also LinkedIn and directory sites for private tutors, all of those. I hope that gives you an idea, Anita. Specific reading materials. So this is B1 or B2 level in French, both with English to French, materials of audio visual. So if you're looking for audio visual, and this is guest, I think. Yes. If you are looking for audio visual, I would recommend the TV5 Apprendre le Français website, where you've got materials for learners at all levels that they can use individually or you can use in class. That would definitely be my first port of call. As for reading, at that age group, B1, yeah, I would definitely start with the Le Petit Nicolas, because the language is very accessible. There are lots of versions available, and there's also a film, so you could integrate the book and the film into your teaching. Okay, so that's the end of the question. I'm just going to give it a moment in case anybody has. Could you recommend resources for teaching German? Oh, Anita, yes, but it would really, really depend. Online, okay. You maybe want to email me and we can have an email conversation about that quite happily. There's a few things I could point you in the direction of, but I would start with the Deutsche Welle, and I would also have a think about Linguiscope. Our sponsors for the language show, they've got some good stuff. It would depend very much on what you're looking for. But happy to have that conversation if you email me. So, without going any further, I probably should turn the shop off at this point so we finish on the final slide. Thank you very much for coming on a Sunday morning, everybody. It has been lovely to see you all. And yes, that ends my talk. Hope you enjoy the rest of the language show. Goodbye.